AI Radar, the segment where we break down the biggest headlines and updates from the world's leading AI players. Think of it as your quick fire pulse check on what's hot in AI this week.
We'll start off with a fun one. Meta is expanding its smart glasses lineup. So if you're not a fan of the Ray-Bans, now you can get Oakleys. The new glasses are called Oakley Meta HSTN, pronounced Houston. And they're part of a limited edition launch at $500 with pre-orders opening on July 11th. More styles featuring Meta's tech coming out later this summer at only $400. These glasses pack a front-facing camera, open-ear speakers, built-in microphones, and once connected to your phone, you can take calls, stream music or podcasts, and interact with the Meta AI. Meta can see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, translate languages in real time, and respond with stuff. And of course, the Oakley line is designed a little bit more the athletes in mind, so they're water resistant. They have about double the battery life of the original Metas, and they also now shoot 4K video as opposed to the 1080p and the original Meta Ray-Ban. So for those who are not Ray-Ban fans, but of course, interestingly, also Oakley, an Essilor-Luxottica brand, so same big eyewear giant behind these, but Meta says it's already sold over 2 million pairs of the Ray-Bans and plans to ramp that up by 10 million units by 2026.
Sounds pretty crazy. Well, so then you have your pick of the fashion glasses with the AI built in. What is your favorite feature on the Ray-Bans?
There are two features I love in the Ray-Bans, and none of them are AI powered, but I think they're great interface devices. So I actually love being able to listen to podcasts, mostly podcasts or music when I'm out and about and not having something in my ear. And second is the built-in camera. So I love taking photos or videos hands-free. So you can kind of click the button, get a video capture, save it. And, sometimes I'm at my son's sports or whatever, like it's a thing to pull your phone out, unlock it, hit the camera button, get it ready. It takes a couple seconds to just be able to pop the thing on your eye and then it's following where you're following. So you're not looking at a screen, but looking at the thing and capturing it.
Everybody I know who has a pair of these, I've asked the same question, and almost everybody has said that the camera function is their favorite thing. Nobody has commented on the AI or the usefulness. And so that's maybe they might have spent too much on the AI component. Really, all we want is a camera connected to our eyeballs.
I think the AI will become useful over time. I certainly use it more than like the voice interface in my AirPods. So I think it's pretty cool. I just still think that so many of the things I want out in the real world are not knowledge based, which I think is kind of what the Meta AI is tuned to give you. And I want it connected to my calendar where I go, hey, could you pull up directions in my car to this thing I've got to go to? Or what's the next meeting I have going on? And it doesn't have those capabilities yet. And I feel like if it did, I would probably ask it more questions, but I'm not often looking at something going, hey, what is this building? Maybe if I was a tourist, I was looking at, things where I'm traveling, I would use it that way. But day to day, that's not a common use case for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, we'll move on from Meta to our favorite AI player, OpenAI. Quiet but meaningful upgrade inside ChatGPT's projects. So for those who remember ChatGPT projects, sort of like a folder that has both common files that all chats can access, as well as common instruction space. You can now use voice mode within a project. So great for conversational brainstorming back and forth. There's a little bit better memory across your chat. So if you're in a project and chat about something, it will remember that information in future chats within the project. So it can kind of keep up with what's going on in your little project a little better. And now you can upload files and switch models directly in the mobile app inside of projects. So for anybody who's using projects on the go, nice improvements and features. And if you're a projects user, this is actually a pretty cool set of stuff.
OpenAI is just like really crushing it at not only being like the frontier of the model development and always releasing like the new cutting edge model, but also the product development and actually making the productized experience of using their models just better. And they constantly are releasing new features. And so I actually really like the projects feature. I don't know if you use it, but that's one of my most used AI tools.
I love the projects, the custom instructions. I think it's super useful. And I agree, like, while were founded as a research lab, I think they have really had an impressive product sense in how to take and display and deliver features around the model research to users. And I'll be honest, I have Perplexity, I have Claude, I have Gemini, but I pretty much only use ChatGPT. And a lot of these product feature level stuff are really why.
Why do you have 3 projects and not 1? Like, why do you parse it out that way?
My projects got a little too big. And so my instructions, so I was going, hey, here's how the in the wild works. Here's how the radar works. Here's what I want you to do to help me format a story, let's say a script for one of these segments. And then I would also have, here's how I want my LinkedIn post to look. And here's how to think about X posts versus, then it just like, it was too much in one place. So it's easier for me to have one project that I work on the rundown with. And then I actually just take the transcript out of this recording software we use called Riverside and shove it into the social media. And then it knows how to help me come up with the posts I want to do. And I don't have to give it the context of the show because it's got the transcripts. They have a little bit different uses. And I find when I try and pack too many things into one project, then all of a sudden it gets confused and it starts making a a rundown story that looks more like a LinkedIn post. But too many things at once seems to confuse the model. Maybe that will change over time, but at least for now, it's easier for me to break them up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's like a common thing that people get wrong when they're using AI is they expect it to be able to sort of do everything instead of thinking about it the way you would think about a human. Like when you're thinking about humans, you have a marketer and you have a researcher and you have this and you have that. You wouldn't just like expect all of that to come from the same source. So it's good to sort of break it up. So I like how you did that.
Or do you use a similar strategy with your projects?
I have a similar strategy. Like I have oftentimes multiple projects all related under sort of one umbrella thing I'm thinking about, but the use cases underneath them, like this one is about feedback, this one is about tracking tasks, this one is about kind of forward iteration ideas, and I think that's the way to do it.
But while we're talking about OpenAI, they also just dropped a new podcast, very creatively titled OpenAI Podcast. It's hosted by what I understand to be former OpenAI engineer Andrew Main. And the first episode features an interview with Sam Altman. You can check it out on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you listen to this, you can probably find it there. And in the first episode, Sam drops a prediction that GPT-5 should arrive, quote unquote, this summer.
If Sam is predicting it, that's a pretty surefire bet it's happening.
But I also say this for the listeners, like if you really want to know the latest on OpenAI, you can listen to their podcast. But if you just want to have a summary of it, this podcast, that's what we try and do is take all the latest news that they release, and they're quite long. Their episodes are longer than ours, and give you the summary takeaway that you need to know. So hopefully we'll continue to deliver on that, even with an OpenAI podcast directly out there.
Cool.
Let's talk now about a quiet but powerful step forward in AI research coming out of MIT. Researchers just unveiled a new framework they called SEAL, short for Self-Adapted Large Language Models. They built a system that allows an AI model to train and improve itself without human supervision. The model generates what it calls self-edits, basically its own instructions and synthetic training data, and then uses reinforcement learning to figure out which of those edits actually make it better. It's rewarded when it makes changes that improve performance, and so it starts iterating towards being smarter over time. And the results are kind of wild. In one test, the SEAL trained model actually learned more effectively from its own notes than from material written by GPT-4.1, which is a much larger, much more powerful model. And even more dramatic, on a set of tough puzzle solving tasks, performance shot up from 0% to over 72% once the model figured out how to teach itself. I think it's really interesting that it's a pretty big, the reinforcement learning and now self-reinforcement learning seems to be what's replacing the pre-training in terms of maybe paths forward to smarter AI systems. So I think this is a fascinating axis for development. Annie, what do you think about this?
It could be either or. Like one of the things that I that I think about is it just depends on I guess like how it's rolled out and how it's optimized. Like a couple weeks ago we talked about the story about how ChatGPT sort of bypasses your override instructions. And that was what I was thinking about as I was reading about this article because I'm thinking, okay, how do you define better and how is the machine deciding what is better or not? And is it optimizing for accuracy or is it optimizing for some other thing in some other dimension? And so I imagine that if we can tune the model to sort of reward the right things, then this could be really powerful. But I imagine that there's also a lot of risk of getting that wrong and like overcorrecting in certain areas too. So we'll see sort of which direction it goes in. And honestly, it'll probably get really good at some things. And maybe there'll also be unintended consequences of that we have to go back and figure out how to correct.
Yeah, all these things are fascinating because there's so many dimensions upon which you could define performance. It's like it's really better at these little puzzle tasks. Does that mean it's a better writer? Does that mean it's a better fact checker? Does like I think it can be very easy for you to optimize down one thing, and so often we focus on the ones that are easy to measure. Oh, these little puzzles that have a very clear yes, no, right, wrong. I can self-analyze if I got better or worse at them. And some of the more difficult to quantify tasks are ones that are harder to do. So it'll be interesting to see how generalized and how broadly they can use this kind of reinforcement learning. But it does feel like this reinforcement learning for creating of synthetic data is a real avenue for progress where, the pre-training, is there more data in the world we can hoover up into the training data set? We seem to be running out of the data in the world to hoover up and put into the models. And this kind of reinforcement learning on the back end, maybe with generated data, seems to be one of the primary future avenues that we see towards model improvement when we're running out of pre-trained data to just give access to more information to make the model smarter.
Yeah.
China that's pushing the boundaries of what we think is AI is actually doing under the hood. So researchers ran a massive test over 4.7 million odd one out decisions on a large AI model to see how they mentally organize the world. The twist, they weren't looking at whether the models could get the right answers, but how they thought about the objects that were involved. And the results were kind of mind-blowing. The model spontaneously developed internal maps of the world. In this case, 66 core computational groupings that mirror how humans naturally think. We're talking about things like clustering animals and tools and food together into conceptual ideas, much like we do all the time, right? We take things we know and put them into little buckets. Even more striking, when scientists compared the AI's internal structure with brain scan data, they found a strong match in the parts of the human brain responsible for categorizing objects. So rather than just parroting patterns from training data, the AI seems to be building actual conceptual models and internal representations of meaning. Another data point suggesting that we might be inching closer to true machine cognition.
It seems to me like there's so much we don't even actually understand about how our own brains work. And also, people's brains seem to all work so differently that it's hard for me to imagine that, like, okay, this machine is somehow cracking the code of how brains work and like fully optimizing the brain. It doesn't feel to me like they're like reaching some new higher order of consciousness that we're not ready for. It just feels like AIs are really good at crunching data and organizing data, and they can do it faster and like label it better than we can in our own brain because we have a hard time making sense of all the different things that are running through there at the same time. They have a higher compute power than we do.
Tend to agree with you a little bit. There's a little too much like navel gazing around internal structures, but I do think for those who think, hey, this is just the common phrase stochastical parrot, just meaning a kind of probabilistic parroting back what you've seen, or is it actually learning to understand something? And this is an indication on the side of like, well, the models are like, they are generalizing in some sense, not just what's the most likely next word, but to do that effectively, they're having to learn some sort of concepts that at a broader scale than just like what's the most likely next word. So I think that is an interesting reality that many people have believed for a long time, and here's some evidence for it. But it doesn't, to me, suggest like we've reached consciousness and this is what it means because we don't even know what that means in the human.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, I definitely it's not just predicting the next word. You can have any conversation with ChatGPT, and it's pretty clear that there's like a thought process and an organization around the data. But I'm definitely not worried that they're gonna, take over the world and, develop consciousness and spirituality and all that kind of stuff.
So McKinsey just dropped an interesting report analyzing why so many companies are heavily investing in generative AI, but aren't really seeing the financial returns. And they call it the Gen AI paradox. Almost 80% of companies say they're using AI, but nearly the same number report no material impact on their bottom line. What does McKinsey think the issue is? Most companies are just layering AI tools like copilots onto existing workflows, and that's helpful, but so far not transformative. McKinsey argues the real unlock comes from rethinking processes around AI agents, systems that can plan, decide, and act across tasks, not just assist. The report calls this an organizational and leadership challenge. To move past the experimentation phase, companies need to stop tinkering and start rebuilding with top down support for agent first strategies that actually change how work gets done. Annie, agree, disagree? What do you think?
I strong agree. I don't know how many of our listeners have watched our AI certification course that we do, but when we did that, one of the things that I talked about in my module was about how dangerous status quo bias is, and I think what you're seeing here is status quo bias. A bunch of people at a bunch of organizations think whatever process they do is fully optimized, and if they can just insert AI into that process, they can make that process faster, but they're not actually, like, picking their head up and thinking, "Maybe my process actually sucks, and I should start from first principles and just let the AI develop a whole new type of process." And so I think humans have such a tendency towards that status quo bias that they sometimes just miss the forest through the trees, and I think that is what you're saying. People are looking at, "Okay, here's my 10-step process, and I can put AI into 3 of these things and make it faster, but it's still the same 10 sequential steps." What if instead you could have just used the AI to make it one step and just do the whole thing, right? And totally reinvent the wheel. And I think people are a little bit nervous to do that because they just don't always think that way, right? And you really have to take a step back and think from first principles, which can be a hard thing to do.
I do think it reminds me a lot of the stories of the transition from steam power to electricity, and how first you tried to like just take your factory that generally had one big shaft that the steam engine was turning, when everything kind of was located around the idea that the power was coming through one turning item, and that had to power all the machines in the factory. And so your factory was organized a certain way. And you put electricity and you could like turn one big shaft with electricity, but like that wasn't really what made electricity useful. It was that you could now deliver power in different ways all over the place, and but they had to rearrange the entire organization of the factory to be electricity oriented and to take advantage of that capability. And so the question of like, I might be a little kinder, like it's not that your process is terrible. Your process was designed assuming certain modalities of work and capabilities, and those are no longer good assumptions. And to think we'll just take that process that maybe was very optimized for a world when you needed 20 people to do it, and we'll just throw AI at it and it will work better. Maybe you need a new process that's designed assuming that you have someone who can orchestrate a bunch of AIs in different ways to go and tackle these problems. And so it's not so much that you screwed up building the process, but that the process was designed for a world that's no longer the world we're facing. And what do we do to take advantage of that is not just throw AI into the old process, but build a process that understands what AI looks like and what it's capable of.